Ready to build your first proper responsive website? I got you covered. Today we'll be building this website. This will be for a boating company that lets you rent out boats and arrange trips on the sea as well as on rivers and lakes. As you can see, it's quite simple. There are two buttons here. If you click either of these, it will scroll you down to the next section. The next section is about what we offer. Here are some hover cards. Then you simply come to the contact section where there will be a contact form. It won't be functional since we are using only HTML and CSS, but we can look at it later. Then if you switch to the About section, then here's a simple introduction of who we are, etc., what others say. Then there are some testimonial cards, and yet again, the footer. If you want to have a look how it looks on the smallest device, well, this is it. The navbar then changes, as you can see it right here. Then you simply scroll down. This is the contact section. It's now formed into a column. The about section looks somewhat similar, except that here are the little cards that you need to work with. So I hope you're ready to build this fully responsive site for this boating company. Let's get started. So here we are. This is our site opened in our empty Visual Studio Code. I've opened up a folder, and here will be images that we'll be using throughout the building of this site. So first things first, let's create our index.html. Put an exclamation mark in there, if it would let me. There we go. Change this site name to responsive site or whatever you'd like to call it. I zoom in a little so that you can see better. That should do. Then also create a style.css. This will be our base styling. We'll start off in our style.css because there are some basic settings that I'd like to do. Also, I will open the live server extension so that our website updates automatically. It's full blank. The title is there. That's how it should be. To start off, I'll copy over some values. The first one is a font import. We'll be using two fonts. You are free to copy this over from the source code. And then we are selecting all the elements and resetting their margin and padding and giving everything a border, a box sizing border box. This will make it so that the border is counted in and won't offset the elements. Another thing that you will have to copy over, and you can also play around with this, is the root element. The root element will mean that you select everything. And the reason we select everything is not because we actually want to style it, but because we want to make some theme variables, and these theme variables will enable us to use it just like you would in any other programming language, and you'll be able to access these colors in CSS. And whenever you change these colors, you don't have to go over all the places you've used the color. You'll just be able to do it from one place. And that's why I've put some primary background here, secondary background, footer, etc. So it's your theme basically that you copy over here. Then I'd also like to style our HTML, and it's important to put the HTML here because I'd like to change the scroll behavior to be smooth. These are some preparations because we'll be doing smooth scrolling as I showed you before. And then we'll come to styling the body. The body will have a font family called Noto Sans, and if it can be found, then it will be sans serif. The background color will be primary background, and Visual Studio Code will help you out, but as you can see, it makes it so that the var is put there as of variable, and then the background you've given there, or the color you've given there. The basic color will be the primary text. And as for the other typography settings, I'd also like the font size to be 1 rem units by default, the font weight to be 400, and the line height to be 1.75. These are the basic settings for our body. And I'd also like to style our h1. Give it some margin, bottom, 1 rem units. What's important is, I said, we imported two font families with this import right here. So the font family for the h1 elements will be Ride Honey, and sans serif otherwise if it's not found. I'll also add some typography settings real quick. And we are done with our basic settings. This is something that I wanted to go through first. And now we can link up our CSS. So I'll come here and link CSS and then choose the style.css. You can already see the background changed. So now that that's done, I'd like to work on the navbar at first. So we'll create a header element. This will signal our navbar, and then we'll create a div with the class logo. Remember, this is a syntax, logo. Like this is the syntax to create a div with a certain class. I'd also like an input element, which will be the type checkbox. Its ID will be menu toggle, and there will also be a class to it, menu toggle checkbox. Now the reason we need an input will come later when it's responsive, and the reason we need an ID for it because we'll be creating a label for it that will be clickable, and if you click it, then you will be able to change that label as well as bring the responsive navbar out. So let's create that label. You give what will be it for, and you give it the ID, which will be the menu toggle. And let's give it a class menu toggle label, and inside this label we'll create 3 spans. This will be the hamburger menu, and each of them will be with the class bar. And if you put ×3 there, then you can already see it will create 3 divs for me. Let me just break this up just like this. And then after that comes the real navigation that will be visible on the PC. It will have the class navigation. We'll be creating 4 divs with the class nav div, and inside each of them, if you hold down Alt in Windows and Visual Studio Code, you can select multiple areas. We'll be creating A-links. Let's just put a hashtag there by default, and then each of them will be having a name, and that's it. Our header and our HTML is done for this part. Let's go to our CSS. So to separate this a little more in VS Code, because we'll be having a bunch of sections, I press Ctrl K and C to create a comment, and then hashtag region, then give the name of the region, which will be basic settings here, then Ctrl K C, hashtag end region, copy this end region, put it at the bottom of our basic settings, and then I can close this up just simply like this. So we'll be having a look at the header first. Its width will be 100%, its height will be 100 pixels, its position is going to be absolute, and we'll be heavily using Flexbox throughout this section. So if you're not familiar with that, we do have a video on it. The display flex is what enables us the Flexbox properties. We'll justify the content to be space between, because remember, this will put the logo and the other nav elements with the space all between them, so it will push them to the sides. On the vertical axis, we set them to the center, and the background color will be the primary background. You won't see a change in background color just now, but when the image gets there, it will be quite visible. Then some basic A settings. All I want to do here is set the text decoration to none, so that there won't be an underline and there won't be color changes whenever you click a link or the link that you already visited. Then I go for a hover effect. Inside the header, the A elements should have a hover effect, and their color will be the secondary hover effect. Then we go for the logo, and the logo is going to have a background image with the URL. Since it's called Harbor Heaven, I will get the logo.png out right here. The background repeat will be no repeat. Background position will be centered just like that. The background size will be contain, and then let's also, what I found is that if we put background size 80%, it will make it a little smaller, and then the width will be 300 pixels, the height will be 100 pixels, and I'll also put a margin left of 150 pixels. Now, These are very logo based, so if you're working with a different image, you might have to adjust them. But the first 3 lines are what you're always going to need at a logo. The others are fully customizable for your needs. And then we come to the navigation section, which you remember is actually what holds the elements here. Its width will be 80% of the given space. I don't want it to go to the sides. There will be a padding bottom given 20 pixels just to make it a little bit more styled. There will be a border bottom 1 pixel. The color will be the primary text and it will be a solid border. And Visual Studio Code thought that this time I won't help you out, so I have to do it like this. Type it out. There will be a margin right of 250 pixels is what I found fitting. Display the elements in a flex modes to enable flex properties and align them this time to the right on the horizontal axis and center on the vertical axis. I also found that having a gap of 15 pixels is great, and remember the gap is different from the margin because it will only put it towards these sides. I also put an overflow hidden in here. Also come back because as I see I missed the A element stylings for the A elements inside the header. Their color will be primary text. Their font size will be 1.1 rem units and their font weight will be 400. Much better already. Remember when we made the checkbox, it's already there so you can see it. The menu toggle checkbox by default will be display none, so I'd like it to be hidden. However, the menu toggle label also going to be hidden by default. Its flex direction will be a column and there will be a cursor pointer whenever you go into it so that it changes the pointer, and the margin right of 3 rem units is what I found fitting. And then I'll copy this selector over and the bar inside, remember the bar is the hamburger icon inside the menu toggle label. The width will be 25 pixels, the height will be 3 pixels, their background color will be the primary text because these are just some divs, so they don't actually have a color. Then the margin will be 4 pixels on the top and the bottom and 0 on the sides. And I'd also like to put a transition of 0.4 seconds on it so that this will make the animation smooth later. And talking of transitions, before I forget, let's put a transition to the navigation menu. So there will be a transition, it will be for the max height, because the max height is what will be changing in a minute whenever we are opening the menu, the drop down, and it will be with the easy now transition. We are not far from the end of our navbar, so there will be a media query to make it fully responsive with a max width of 1000 pixels. So below 1000 pixels we apply these transitions, and as for the navigation, it will be display flex, and the flex direction will be set to a column so that they are aligned properly in the drop down way, the column way. The width will be 100% just to be sure we set everything here. Their position will be absolute, and what we're going to do is offset it by 100 pixels from the top, and the left will be just 0 to set it out. Its background color will be primary background. I remove the border button from it whenever it's in this state, so the border button will be none. The margin right will be zeroed out, the gaps will be zeroed out between the elements, the padding bottom that we've given above will be zeroed out, its max height will be 0, and pay attention to this because it's 0 but we'll set it back later, and the same transition will be applied as above. So let's copy this over to make sure it's here as well. The same transition will be applied to this state as well. And because we've already hit 1000 pixels on the screen, you can see it's not yet it's not visible, it's hidden. Then we'll go to the nav divs. there will be flex box, so display flex. Let's simply align everything to the center, even the text align. I'd like it to be centered this time. Their width will be 100%, and there should be a transition for their background color with the ease and out property 0.3 seconds. This will be because we'll be putting hover animation on it, or transition. The padding will be 15 pixels and 0. And then let's also put some styling on the header. The A elements inside the header will be a width of 100%. This will be important to highlight everything that is given there in whenever you hover over it. And then the nav div, whenever you hover over the nav div like this is why we needed the background color transition up above. I'd like it to have a secondary background whenever you hover over it. As for the A elements as well, so inside the header, the A elements, if you hover over them, since now they are 100% wide, they will take up a full row, and you will see it in a minute. But I like their text color to be the secondary text. And now comes the part where I actually show you how to enable these values. So the menu toggle checkbox, whenever it's checked, then we apply some styling to the navigation element. Its max height, not max width, max height will be 100 pixel height. And remember, we put a transition on the max height up here, and we've also set it to 0, but now that we are setting it back, it will go smoothly. And then the menu toggle label, this will have a display flex instead of a display none, because we've set display none right here, but now it's display flex, so it's visible. And now comes the logo. The logo, what I found is that its position should be relative, and I'll offset it towards the left side by minus 50 pixels, and the margin left, I zero it out because there is a 150 pixels margin given, so that it's now nicely on the side. The reason we needed to offset it to the left by minus 50 pixels is simply because my image is a bit off. This logo is a bit off. This is again customizable for your needs. And then comes the menu toggle checkbox. Whenever it's checked, then select the menu toggle label, and inside the menu toggle label, the bar, the end child of the bar, which will be the first. So it's a huge selector. But what we essentially do here is whenever it's checked, we select the first hamburger menu element up here, because then now it's, it's 3 divs, 3 pens, and then we rotate it by transform rotate 45 degrees, sorry, minus 45 degrees for the X to form. And not only that, but we translate them by minus 5 pixels on the x-axis and 10 pixels on the y-axis. Then I will copy over this value a few more times, well, 3 more to be honest. We select the second child, and we second the third child as well. On the second, we do nothing but make it transparent, so opacity 0. On the third child, we remove the minus from the degrees, and then put another minus at minus 10 pixels. So now our navbar is basically done. You can see the animation that's given in the little hamburger menu. That's because we've put transition, we find it right here, so it will transition all of the elements. And then there are the hover effects that we've applied. You can see whenever I hover over it, the A element is 100% width, so it gets black, and the other things also get highlighted. So it's quite simple and quite good. And on a big screen, it's also just as I showed you. Now continuing on, let's work on the hero section, which is basically the home page. So first of all, let's create a section. It will be with the class hero, and inside it, let's create a div with the class content, and inside the content we'll have the h1 element and a p element. They will both be just the text you saw there. And let's also create some buttons. So create a div with the class hero buttons, and then create two hrefs, two increments. One of them is going to be with the class primary button, while the other is going to be with the class secondary button. I fill these up with text, you are free to copy them over, and our hero section is done in our HTML. So now let's go to our CSS. I'd like to separate this part as well, the part that we've written for our header. So this will be Navbar Settings and the region. So now I can close this up and move on to our hero section. Let's just create the region first for it. This will be a more straightforward one. So just style the hero. Its width will be 100% and its height will be 100 viewport height units. So it's one device height. It will use flexbox to justify the content onto the end, so to the right side, and then align the items to the center. I'd like to give it a linear gradient background, and I'll copy this and explain. So we are doing a linear gradient here. Instead of degrees, we gave it to go towards the right side. There will be a base 00, a fully transparent color given from 0%, and it will blend until 85%, where the primary background is given there. And then not only that, but we are using the background image, so the linear gradient here will blend together with the URL, with the background that you see right there. And then the background position will be centered, the background repeat will be no repeat, and the background size will be not contain cover. So now you can already see that there is the gradient on the right side, but in the preview we also had a gradient on the bottom side, and we cannot really do much about it if we can only apply one gradient to one side. So what we'll be doing is utilizing a selector called after. The after element will create a new element in the DOM dynamically after the given element that we're selecting, and this will be having a content, because a content is strictly a must when using an after or a before element, and it will simply be blank. Its position will be absolute so that we can move it around. It will be 0 from the left, 0 from the right, 0 from the bottom, just to sort these out. Its height will be always 15% of the space that's given. And again, a similar linear gradient background, but this time it will go to the bottom and there won't be an image given there. So you can already see it appeared. It's a nice linear background towards the bottom. And if I open the developer tools for you and come here with the select tool, you can see that that is the after section, and it really did put it after the hero section. So as a child of the hero, but after it. It's right there, and you can see the styling. If I just zoom in a little bit, you can see it better. Now moving on, I'd like to style the content inside the hero section. Its width will be 100 pixels, its height will be 500 pixels. This is what I found fitting for the screen. And then it will use display flex. The flex direction will be a column so that they are not laid out in a row. There will be justified to the center and aligned to the center, so it's quite simple. And then 0 margin on the top and 20% margin on the sides, starting to align now. So I'd also like to, inside the content, style the p tag. The p tag is going to have a margin bottom of 2.5 rem units. Then the hero buttons. Now pay attention, remember this is a div that holds together the buttons, so its width will be 100%. It will use flexbox to align them in a row. It will justify the content to the left side and align them vertically to the center. It's that simple, and I'd also like a gap of 20 pixels between the two buttons. As for the actual buttons, so inside the hero buttons, the A element, their text align will be center, that's clear. Their text transform will be uppercase, because that's how it looks nice with that font. I'd like them to be a little bit rounded, but not too much, so 0.2 rem units, a padding of 1 rem unit from the top and the bottom, and 3 rem units from the sides. The font size will be 1 rem unit. The font weight will be a little bit bigger from the default, 700 is what I'm going for. And then the line height will be 1.75. And now to style them individually, I style the primary button first. Its border will be none. Its color will be the secondary text, and its background color will be the primary text. Let's also give it a transition for the background color. 0.2 seconds ease in out. This is because the next selector is going to be a hover effect for this button, which will be the secondary hover that I'd like to give it. And now I copy this over, change the primary button to be secondary button, but here I'd like for it to have a border, a 1 pixel solid border with the primary text color. Its color will also be the primary text. Its background color will be an RGB A value with 0, 0, 0, 0, so it's going to be transparent. And as for the hover effect, it will be secondary hover transparent. And I've mistyped this. This should be BTN, not button. That's why it's not applying. And certainly, of course, I switched these two up. Just switch the color and the background color. And there we go. Our button is ready. And now we'll simply be jumping to some media queries for this as well. What I found is that a max width below 700 pixels, we should apply these classes. So the hero will have a background image of radial gradient, but actually I just copy this over because yet again this is a gradient. It's a radial gradient, it's in a circle shape instead of a degree. It's a transparent, and then after till 75% it's a primary background color, and it's again with the URL that's bending together. Then the hero content, its width will be 100%. It will be display flex just again here, but this time, or maybe not, the flex direction will be column. We'll justify it this time to the center, align the items to the center, margin 0 and 10%. So we change the alignment and the margin got reduced a little bit. As for the hero buttons, we'll display flex. Their flex direction will be a column this time. They will be centered. Both the justify and the align items will be centered. And now let's select the primary button as well as the secondary button together. And their width will be 100% now, so that they stretch. And also I'd like to change the age one a little bit. So there will be a margin top of 20 pixels, just a fine adjustment, and then the font size of 3.25 rem units. So those are the stylings. And bear with me just a little more before we finish this section, because we need yet again another media query, otherwise this won't be responsive. So max width, this will be 500 pixels. It's going to be really simple. The age one is going to have a different margin, 0 and 5%. The P element inside the content will have a margin bottom 2 rem and the line height of 1.5 rem. Also the content is what I miss here. It's going to have a different margin of 0 and 5%. So these are just to make sure everything aligns. If I didn't have the code prepared, you'd have to play around with this and just suffer through it. And then the after element, yet again the content will be set. Its position will be absolute. zero out the left, the right, and the bottom. Its height will be 15%, and just a linear gradient, but I believe it's the same as it was before. So there we go, we are done with the hero section. It's already looking quite nice. If I go to the responsive view, then you can see this is on a big screen, and as I start shrinking it down, the navbar already changed. And now the buttons stretch, and on the smallest screen, really it's not responsive, so let's just adjust that. So what I changed here is give the age on a font size, and there was a different margin setting here. I just simply put a margin top here. That's the two things that I've changed. This is all you need to change for it to be responsive. Now let's move on to the next section, which will be the services section. And let's also give this an ID of services, because I'd like to be able to scroll to this later. Create an h2 here with the class title. Create an h3, I'll fill it up with text, and then create a div with the class cards. And inside this, create a div with the class card. In the card, there will be an image. We don't need the alt value for that image. It will be from the images, and I'd like the both first, and then another div called card content. Inside that, a h2 with the name rowing, and then just a p element. I fill it up with text, and then an anchor element, give it a hashtag, find out more. So these are the classes that we'll be working with. You can see it's not quite the best because we still need to style it. So let's create the region for the services, and let's start styling the services. It will use flexbox. The flex direction will be a column. It will justify to the center on both axes. Then inside the services, the h2, I will simply set a font family settings. Remember, right honey, and if it can't load, then sans serif. As for the h3, I need a margin 0 on the top and the bottom, but 10% on the sides. It's text align, I prefer it to be centered, and the margin bottom of 40 pixels is what I found fitting. You can already see the text forming. Then comes the title. The title should be bigger, so a 3 rem units font size will do. Margin bottom 20 pixels and the font weight of 700. Now the cards div, it will take up all the width that's given. Its background color will be the primary background. The padding will be 100 pixels from the top and the bottom and 5% from the sides. Then I'd also like to zero out the padding top so that there is only padding from the bottom. It will have flexbox, and we justify the content to space them out evenly. There is only one card there, but there will be 3, and then we center them vertically. I'd like a gap of 30 pixels at least between the elements, and we'll be using the flex wrap to make them responsive when the screen squeezes. And now we come to styling the card. What I found is that a width of 300 pixels and a height of 450 pixels will be suitable. Their border radius will be 10 pixels. The overflow will be hidden, and the reason it will be hidden is remember, this is a hover effect card and it will overflow, but we will do some adjustments whenever we hover over the card. Its cursor will be a pointer whenever you hover over it. Its position will be relative. That's very important, because then it will hold all the absolute elements as children. Its color will be the primary text. Let's give it a border of 5 pixels, solid, and then a little RGB value here. It's a bit grayish, whitish. The margin will be 20 pixels on the top and bottom and 0 on the sides, and the background color will be simply 0 it out to like this. The reason we need pure black there is because when we hover over, I want a black color to appear as an overlay, And you'll see that if you change that, it will change the color of the overlay as well. Then I'd like to style the H2 inside the card, so its position will be absolute. That's needed, and it will be a child element of the relative element. We inset it by auto and auto on the top and right, but at the other places, on the bottom and the left, I want them indented by 30 pixels. This is because it's an absolute element, so it can be positioned, and later you will need to see that we need to position it up more when we hover over it. The margin will be 10 pixel and 0. The font size, well, let's say X large. And we need a transition for the inset, 0.3 seconds, ease in out, and 0.3 seconds yet again for little delay. And the font weight will be normal, while the text transform, however, will be uppercase. Now I select the P element and the A element together. Their position will also be absolute because I'd like to move them around. Their opacity will be 0 by default so that they are invisible. Their max width will be 80%. And I'd like a transition for their opacity of 0.3 seconds and ease out transition so that they smoothly come back whenever we hover over the element. And let's copy the P element selector. I'd like to style that separately because we need to inset it by auto and auto on the top and the right, but on the bottom 40 pixels and 30 pixels on the left. Sorry, not 40 pixels, 80 pixels, because it needs to be above. If you look at it here, it needs to be above the link. So this is the insetting from the cards, but it's not yet applied in our site. Now here we do need for the A element as well a different inset, and it's going to be below the P element. You will have to adjust these insets depending on how much text you'd like to put into those cards. The color will be the primary text. The text underline offset will be 5 pixels and the text decoration will be underline. Color, it will be, well, not actually primary text, it will be the secondary hover, which I'd like for the text, because it's going to be a little bit different when we hover over it. I copy this selector, so hover. I'd like its color to be coral. This is a built-in color in CSS. I paste in the same value that we've copied, but this time I'd like the H2 to be modified whenever you hover over the card. And now we're going to inset it by auto as before, 270 pixels on the top and 30 pixels the usual on from the left, and there will be a transition for insetting it, 0.3 seconds ease in out. Let's copy over this selector now and paste it 2 times, because one is going to be for the P element, the other is going to be for A element. They are going to be inserted together. Their opacity will come back to 1. And let's put, actually we have a transition for the opacity right here. Let's just copy that over. And now it should do it smoothly. So there is the drawing. And after the card going back, let's also create a selector. So I copy this selector and I'd like to style the image inside that. So its position is also going to be absolute. Its width will be 100%, its height will be 100%, the opacity will be slightly transparent, so 0.8, and the transition for the opacity 0.2 seconds ease out. This is for the image. And now let's come back to the hover effects and create, I copy this over so that whenever you hover over the card, yet again we modify the image, and there will be a transition for the opacity of 0.3 seconds ease in, and the opacity will go down to 0.3 seconds. And because the opacity goes down, it starts becoming transparent, and because we have a black background, it should be going to black, and here it's not 0.3 seconds, it's just 0.3. So now it's black, and now the hover effect is working just as before. All that's left is to copy over the card. So I just shut it off, copy it over 2 more times, and then change it. What was it? Was motorboats and then sea sailing. So the motorboat and then the sail.jpg. There we go. And you can already see that FlexWrap wrapped it up for us. But if I come full, it's like this in a full view. And on the smallest view, it's just working like this. And FlexWrap will work it out for us whenever the screen squeezes. So now that we're done with that, we'll work on the contact form, which will look like this. There is the coral hover effect as well. So jumping back, create a section. It will have the class contact, and it will have the ID contact. Then a div with the class base info, and below that another div with the class contact form. Inside the base info there are just some simple h2 and a p element, and we'll be needing 3 a elements. Each of them is going to be a little bit different, and we need inside all of them an image with the class icon. I removed the alt attribute, we don't need to worry about CEO right now. Let me fill up the A elements with some text. Each image is going to be a different SVG, so the first one is going to be images/mail. The second is going to be the images/phone, and the third will be the images/location. And now each href is going to be having a different value. The first one will be mail2, then email example.com. When you press the mail2, it will open a certain email app that you can email to, or your Gmail. The second is a phone. So when you press something with the tag tel as for an anchor element, then it's going to be able to call up a number. And the third is, we just leave it at blank. So down here you can see the images are really big. So we'll go over to style those. But before we do that, let's just fill up the form here. So create a form, the action does not matter. And we need 3 input elements. One of them is going to be of type text. One of them is going to be of type email, and the other is going to be of type tel, as for the phone. Let's give each of them a placeholder. This will be what appears in the text if they haven't typed in anything yet. Let's also create a text area. A text area is a bigger area where you can resize it and you can write in it. So it's usually for the message. So the placeholder will be type your message here. We don't need an ID for this. And let's also put a button. This will be of type submit. And it will say send. So now we are done with our HTML. It truly is a mess. But to sort things out, we'll jump onto our CSS and create the region. After that, we can start with styling the contact. So it's of course going to use flexbox. The justify content will be space between, because one of them is going to hold the base info, the other the form, and I want them to be pushed aside. The align items will be the start, so vertically to the start. The padding will be 0 and 10%. Give it a little bit of margin bottom, and then a gap of 30 pixels will do. Then going on, let's work on the H2. The font family will be Bright Honey, otherwise sans serif. The font size will be 3 rem units. The font weight will be 700. As for the P element inside the contact, its margin bottom will be 1 rem unit. And we are done with our typography. Let's work on the link. It will be display flex. everything to the center as usual. The color will be primary text. There will be a text underline offset 5 pixels. Basically, this is the same as we've done with the above links. Oh, sorry, the color is secondary hover. Yet again, secondary hover, and the hover effect, just like we did before. As for the icons, we are finally going to see something. Their width will be 30 pixels along with their height. There will be a margin of 10 pixels around them, and their margin from the left side will be 0, just to align properly from a little design perspective. It's not really necessary, but I like it this way. As for the contact form inside the actual contact, the max width will be 50%. And remember, the contact form is not the form, it's just a div. The width will be 100%. We will display flex direction column, justify content center, and then also center on the other side. So you probably got what this does now. Even if you didn't do flexbox, it just centers everything and puts it into a column. As for the form, the width is going to be 100%. That's all for the form styling. And as for the input inside the contact form, it will be display block, because by default they are inline elements, and that's not good. I'd like them to be under each other. Their height will be 40 pixels. Their width will be 100%. Let's give them some margin bottom and right. A little bit of border radius as before, 0.2 rem units will do. I'd like to remove their border, so border none. I'd like to give them a little bit of padding of 10 pixels, and their outline will be none. The outline will remove that basic behavior. Whenever you would click into it, there would be an outline, but I do not want that. And let me show you the difference between an input element and a text area. As you can see, the text area is not styled yet, unlike the input elements, but there is a little something here at the bottom that will let you fully resize the text area if your text doesn't fit. So now let's format the text area. Its min height will be 9 rem units. I like it to have a certain min height. Its outline will be none, because I don't want the default behavior. And then just a border radius of 0.2 rem units to round it a little bit, a width of 100%, and a little bit of padding, 10 pixels will do. It's really simple. We are closing in to the end of this contact section, because we'll be styling the button inside the contact form. Its text align will be center, its text transform will be uppercase, and its border will be none, because buttons tend to have borders by default. Its color will be the secondary text. Its background color will be the primary text. Its width will be 150 pixels. The simple border radius for 0.2 rem units, just like we did before. Margin top of 1.5 rem units. A little bit of padding of 1 rem unit from the top and the bottom, 3 from the sides. It's really simple. And then a font size of 1 rem unit, a font weight of 700. Meanwhile, a line height of 1.75. And now let's add a simple hover effect for it. So all it does, it's when you apply, or sorry, when you hover over it, then the background color changes. It's that simple. And as for the last touch to our contact form, we write a media query, max width 650 pixels, so below 650 pixels. The contact will change its flex direction to be a column. Its justify content will be center, and the align items will be center as well. So from the start that we did up above, somewhere here, there, align item start and space between, now it's center, contact, base info, the max width will be 100%, and the same goes for the contact form. Their max width will be 100%, and that's it. And as for the hover effect, we also need a transition of background color 0.2 seconds ease in out. And not only that, but something's off with our styling because the items are not aligned properly. And that's because we still need to style up above here the base info, because we haven't really touched that before. Its max width will be 50%, the width will be 100%. It will use display flex, but with a flex direction of column. It will justify the content to the center and align them to the start. And for some reason the web tools got stuck. There was a mismatch here, but I just had to refresh the page and then it all got sorted out. So live server sometimes does these things, but it's all sorted out now. So it's great, our contact section is done. And if I come to mobile view, you can see how it's now aligned in a column way, and it just stretches nicely. Well done. And this is how it looks on the PC view. So to keep on moving, the last part on this page will be the footer, and then the about page will be much easier to put together. So let's call a footer element right here. It will be with a div. This will be called footer nav. And then another div. This will be, I named it copyright. Basically a copyright text will be given there and the logo. So inside the copyright, just create a div with the class logo, and then a div and put some text in there. So this copy and copy will take you the copyright symbol. It's embedded in HTML, I believe. Inside the footer nav, we'll just have 4 A elements, and each of them is going to be our nav elements basically. So we're done with our footer HTML. It's quite simple, and I'm on our page, our completed page. This is how it will look like, and right now this is how it looks like. Let's just move on to our CSS. I create the regions real quick, it's good practice. And inside, let's just style the footer. We will have a width of 100% and the min height of 200 pixels. It will use flexbox. The flex direction will be a column, because remember there are two divs that will be below each other. It will justify the content to the center and align them to the center at all times. And it will use flex wrap because the navigation elements, if for some reason, but even on the smallest screen, they don't squeeze together that much, but if they do, it will wrap the elements nicely. The background color will be the footer background. The color will be the secondary hover, and the padding will be 0 and 10%. Also a padding top of 1 rem unit, just to give it better padding top. Then inside the footer, we work on the footer nav element. Its height will be 30%, with its width being 100%, just to be sure. It will use flexbox. It will justify the content to the center and align it to the center. In the meanwhile, it will have a gap of 20 pixels and a padding bottom of 10 pixels to give a little spacing from the bottom. You can already see it starting to align. Then inside the footer nav, the A elements, their color will be the secondary hover. Their font size will be 1.1 rem units. Their color will be the primary text whenever you hover over it. 3 more sections is going to be simple. The copyright section inside the footer will have a height of 70%. It will use flexbox, and it will justify with space between to push them aside. It will have an align items center. Remember, this is the vertical axis, and then a text align center, so the text is also centered. The width will be 100%. The border top will be secondary hover, 1 pixel and solid. This is the border or the line up there. It will have a padding of 1 rem unit on the top and the bottom, and otherwise 0. And the flex wrap, just again, it won't be needed, but it's a security measure for responsivity. The footer, copyright, and inside the copyright, the logo. Their height will be 100 pixels. Their position will be set back to static, because remember the logo, this is a class that's already created and we've set it to a relative, but I want it to be static with a different height, and its left will be 0, it will be set back, and the margin left will be zeroed out as well. In the meanwhile, just a very simple media query, a max width of 800 pixels, so below 800 pixels, the footer copyright will have a justify content of center instead of space between. And basically we are done. You can see that it's still space between, and in a big screen it's even more visible. But if I start coming down to a small view, you can see now the logo is centered, everything else is in the center. So it's just all working, it's great. Bear with me just a little longer. The one last part is going to be creating a folder called about, and inside this folder we'll be creating an about.html and an about.css. Here just do the basic structure, change the title, and link the CSS, so link CSS and then about.css. Now what we'll be doing is actually copying over the header as well as the footer. So I copy this, I copy the footer. They should be available on all pages of our site, and corresponding to that, it's a good thing that we've set them in regions, because then I can now copy this to the about.css, and I can also copy the basic settings and the Navbar settings. Just like this, to the top. Now we have all the basic stylings. So I will be opening the about.html with live server now. You can see there is not much to actually do. And that's because we still need to write some HTML. And the first one is going to be up here. It will be a section with the class about. It's really simple. There will be a div. This div will be with the class overlay, and it will be a semi-transparent overlay to darken the background a little bit. Then there will be a div with the class content, and inside this just an h1, who are we, and just a p tag that I fill up with text right there, and an a element. It will be with the class secondary button. Remember, we do have a class like that already created, and we are done with one section HTML, and we can start creating the CSS for it right here. So I create again a region, and inside this we are going to override some things. For example, the z index of the header will be set 3, as well as on the body the overflow x will be hidden, because for some reason the site overflows a little bit on the x-axis, but this sorts it out completely. As for the about, there will be an after element, just like before when we applied the overlay. Its content will be invisible, its position will be absolute, left simply 0, as well as the right simply 0, bottom 0, height 15% just before. This is for the bottom transition, you know what I'm talking about, just like we did at the home section, so I just copy that over. Now we are moving on to actually the about section, which will be 100% width, height of 100 viewport height units, display flags with everything to the center, and simply some background changes. These are familiar to you from the other tag, the other section, our hero section. So basically, but here we are not applying the linear gradient, just selecting the image and then cover, center, center, and no repeat, what we've already set 1,000 times. Then the overlay, just like this. If you have a position absolute, if you have left 0, top 0, but its width will be 100 viewport width units and its height will be 100 viewport height units, so it takes up all the space of our basic about section, and its z-index will be 1, which is lower than the navbar, and it will be lower than the content section because the context section will receive 2. So I just quickly change the background color to primary background transparent, and this is something that we do need to create because it's not yet created. So inside the var, in the settings, I will copy the primary background transparent, and you can just change it here, right here, the transparency, but I've already done that in the preparation. So I just copy the right value over here. So coming back, primary background transparent, and then we move on about content. Its width will be 600 pixels, its height will be 500 pixels, a z-index will be 2, it will be with the display flex direction column, justify center, align center, and the text align center as well. So these are the basic flexbox settings. It will have a margin of 0 on the top and the bottom and 20% on the sides. It's very similar to our hero section. You could also copy over some values if you wanted to. I just typed them out. So the P element will have a margin bottom of 2.5 RAM units. As for the about A, I am actually going to copy the hero section and we'll format it later because now I've decided I'd rather copy those. And the secondary button I will also copy over here, but here this will be called not hero buttons, and this will be renamed to about content, and inside the content the A element will have this styling. And as for the secondary button, let me just see, well, it's basically the same. Yeah, the secondary button can stay there completely like that, and we'll also be needing some media queries which will basically copy from the hero section right here, but we don't actually need the hero tag. We'll write this to .about. We don't need to target the primary button here. We don't need the hero buttons because we don't have that element. The h1 can stay, while here the other h1s can also stay except for the p, and this will be about.content right here. You can also notice how none of our logos are visible, and that's because this is now in a separate folder. So to find the logo, actually it's not here, it's in the CSS. So find the logo, and not images, but /images/logo. And this is because it's a relative path. We are going up one folder, finding the images folder, and then inside that we are choosing the logo. So now both of our logos are back, and basically we are done with our about us section. There is only one last section left, which is the testimonial section, and after that we just need to connect the two pages with routing. So now coming back to our about.html, the last section we'll be writing will be with the class testimonials, and it will also have an ID of testimonials because I'd like to scroll there later. Inside it there will be a div with the class container. Inside the container there will be a div with the class content. Inside that there will be a div with the class review. Outside of the content, create an h2, for example, Steve Jobs. This will be the name of the person who's given the review. Or sorry, not, this should be inside the content but outside of the review, and then inside the review there will be yet again a div with the class stars and a div, sorry, not a div, just a simple p element. I'll fill it with some text, and inside the stars there will be 5 images, so break it up, then image times 5, it's a total mess, great. And inside it, each of them would be dot dot slash images slash star dot svg. So if I didn't mess up the structure, we're basically done, and we can go to our styling. So I've created the region. Now we can start styling our testimonials. The width will be 100%, the padding will be 10%, they will use flexbox, and they will justify with space evenly, because I want the cars to be spaced out evenly. As for the vertical axis, they will be centered, and it's going to use the flex wrap up property to make them responsive, and then there will be a 40 pixel gap between the elements. It's quite simple. And then inside the testimonials, the container, it will have a width of 350 pixels, their height will be 500 pixels, the background image will be a radial gradient and with a blend in the actual background image. So you've already seen it in our first hero section, it's just blending together a radial gradient in a circle form. There is nothing too new about it, as well as the background repeat and background cover. You know what I'm talking about. And there will be a display flex given and the flex direction of column, as well as justify content, the center and align items. This time we'll be aligning them to the start, and we'll give it a z index of 2 so that it's a little bit above. The stars are also in the way, but first let's style the content, which will be very straightforward, basically 100% width and 100% height, a padding of 10%, display flex and flex direction column, and I want them to be pushed aside vertically this time because now the main axis just switched. So justify content space between, and now we can style the stars, which is also going to be really straightforward. Their width will be 100% as well as their height will be 100%. They will have display flex, they will have justify content, they will be justified to the left side. Remember, this is the container for the stars, not the actual star. Align items to the center, and now inside the stars the image will be styled, which is the actual star. It will have simply a width of 30 pixels with a height of 30 pixels. And that's not quite right because it's space between somewhere, but I might have messed up the structure, as I said. I missed the selector here, so testimonials.container.content.review is what we are going to style. It will use flexbox, the flex direction will be a column, and it will have a gap of 20 pixels between. That's one thing. Okay, the problem was a typo with our HTML and CSS. I mistyped testimonials at multiple places, so that was the problem. But you can see it's already fixed, so just watch out for these typos, and I will just come around and copy more of these, 2 more of these cards. The last thing that's left is to actually do the routing. So find every single href that you can. So I'll start with number 1, which is up here, but the CSS href doesn't matter. The home is good as it is. The about should be ./about/about.html. The services should be to the ID services, and the contact should be to the ID contact. This will smoothly scroll there because we've had settings for smooth scrolling. And here the hero section is alright, except here I'd like the rent now to take us to the contact section, while the secondary button, which is up here, should be to the contact section. And the secondary button should be to the contact section. And the secondary button should be to the ID contact. This will scroll smoothly scroll there because we've had settings for smooth scrolling. And here the hero section is alright, except here I'd like the rent now to take us to the contact section, I'd like it to take us to the services. You can see there is the ID services. Without this ID, it won't be able to actually scroll there. There is another one here, but these hrefs won't be linked to anything. The mail tools are fine. And then at the navbar, I'd also like it to make it the about page. And then the services, we'll go to the services tab. And the contact, we'll go to the contact tab. Does the contact have, yes, the contact also has an ID, so that's great. So right now it scrolls us down. See our services, scrolls us down. The navbar, well, it's the home. The about takes us back. We won't be able to go back now. The services take us down. The contact does. Yet again services, yet again contact. I might have mistyped something in the footer. But why is it not? Oh, maybe because we're already in screen, that's why it's not working. As for the home, it takes us back. That's great. Now comes the about page, and in the about page, yet again, the home will take us back to the index.html. The about will do nothing, it's good as it is. The services will take back to index.html hashtag services. This will switch a page and scroll to the services. Then again, index.html contact. What other hrefs do we have? The secondary button, what other says, will take us to the testimonials. As for the home, the footer will take us back to the index.html. The about is nothing. Here, index.html hashtag services, and the same will go to down, except with the contact. Oops. So index.html contact. So here we go. What others say, it scrolls us down. The about will scroll us up. The services will take us down to this section, then back to about. The contact will take us to the contact section. It's a little laggy here in live server, and the home will take us back. Then let's try the about section. The home will also take us back. The services will scroll us to the services, and from the about page, the contact also takes us to the about. Great, so we've sorted out the routing, and basically our site is finished. I hope you enjoyed it. It was a pretty long section and a pretty long video, but I hope you can take away from it, and you have your own site now. Congratulations, you can make it your own. So if you found value in this video and would like to see more, please consider giving us a like, maybe even subscribe. But other than that, I just hope to see you in the next one.